So I'm going to kick off on the journey that I've been on in the last 10 years, and I'm very grateful to have that journey. I'm grateful to be standing up here. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Andre, to share that journey. It's been a rocky journey, but it's been full of successes and full of failures. And I think the whole idea of that full of failures is that we learned so much in those failures in the early days. So what I'm going to be touching on today is a bit of agenda, but the bottom line is what we're doing is we're running through what is the business looking for, what's the journey, or the agile journey and the agile transformation look like, what are the common themes that we're seeing, what are some of the case studies of success, the journeys that I've been on, and what are some of the things that people are doing, so governing PMOs, creating right requirements. So I'm going to touch on a few of those things because they can become the cornerstone of really good business agility. Okay, so business agility. So what does the business require? And none of this stuff is new, okay? And I think that's, everybody's saying nothing's new, and it's just the way we're going about it is different. And the thing is that the businesses, what do we need to do with disruption in the market? We need to be able to better manage our priorities. If something hits us, something comes along, we need to be able to say, I need to shift. How do I do that? Okay. I need to be able to have frequent and constant delivery of value all the time, not just once a year. Okay, I need to have that constant delivery of value. I need to be predictable, and I need to up my quality. Now, I've specifically left number 5 off. Okay, and why have I left number 5 off? Is because from an experience perspective. So from a theory perspective, 5 big. I'll leave it on there. From an experience perspective, if you do the top 4, number 5 absolutely disappears. Okay, because people come to you and sit around the table. My previous CEO called the meeting with the executive and says, we are getting so much predictable value. How much more can we put down to get more value out? And they were looking to spend more rather than to cut down the costs because the value was there. So if you're shifting the outcomes, really at the end of the day, you start to shift the worry about cost and more about value. And in the day, that's what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to deliver agile, we're trying to deliver the outcomes, and I think that's a very key message, and hopefully we're getting most of that through what we talk about today. So a little bit of fun, right? Okay, so this is how some of the journey start. Okay, those who haven't, maybe this is an interesting one. Okay, so we get a bit of stuff and we give it to we create an agile team, and the agile team takes that work and it produces some good outcomes. Okay, and then what we're doing is we're saying, well, that really works for us, so we're going to grow our team, right? So we grow these agile teams and we spend more time doing it. Now, this is conceptual, right? This might be 1 team, this might be 3 teams. In some organizations, that's 45 teams, okay? And yes, there's a big focus, and often the digital team is the place where the big focus on agile delivery becomes. Okay, but they're usually very contained teams, even though some of them are big. But if you look at the percentage spend overall, what Andre was saying, still looking at the 20%. So it's still not the biggest part of your organization where you're delivering. What happens is the enterprise comes along, right, and says, right, this looks really nice. I want to get more stuff into this engine, and I want to get more value out of it because it's working really well. Okay. Then somebody said the other day that agile is the new black, and actually design thinking is the new black. Okay. We now got design thinking on. So we got group of people we've sent on human-centered design. We're all practitioners of driving innovation and driving customer value faster and quicker. And we've got a whole lot more stuff on the table. So we've got a whole lot of stuff. And what tends to happen in the beginning of the journey is that, okay, it just goes everywhere. Now, I know that was a little bit of a hectic response to enterprise coming in. And some organizations get levels of success, and some organizations actually have that, and I've seen that before. And constantly what's happening is then often what happens is those teams start disappearing. You either get a hybrid of those teams, or actually people start disinvesting. And it almost becomes that at the management and executive level, there's a disinvestment in actually wanting to move down that route. So you lose the opportunity to continue. Okay, so with that in mind, what are the things we need to think about? Okay. So the first thing is not all the teams are the same. And I think there's a very strong drive in the market, and there's a hype in the market saying there are specific methodologies that you must use, go out and do them, and they're the best in the world, right? The bottom line is, even if you use those methodologies, not every team's going to be the same. The performance of the team, the skill in that team, even the fluidity of the team are different. But not only that, the teams there are different agile methods that people are going to use. And if you are truly being agile, you're allowing the team to self-govern. So you're allowing the team to find the best way they deliver. You're not being too prescriptive. Now, that doesn't mean you mustn't give consistency, but if you're too prescriptive in the way they deliver in the dev world, you actually are taking away the level of ingenuity of very smart people. And the other part is the little squares in there. You've got hybrids and you've got waterfall teams, and they might never want to change. And maybe those teams are delivering such good value, there's no point in changing them. Don't break what's working really well. There's no point in that. So the first realization is we don't want to change for the sake of being agile. We want to change for the sake of we want to get more throughput in the dev world. And that is that's where the large growth of agile has been in the development world. But now we want to scale it to the enterprise. And what does that mean? So yes, obviously, at an enterprise level, there's a lot of work happening in design thinking. So because it's been a little bit chaotic in some organization around it, doesn't mean that design thinking is not a great thing. It's a really good thing, but it has a place, okay? And it has a place in research. I need to understand what my customers really want. I need to spend the money and really get a good understanding. And also when I'm in the process of delivering outcomes, I want really good innovative ways of making sure I can design my outcomes in a way that are desirable to my customers. It's really good, but it has to be in the context of delivering outcomes, not in the context of I can go out there. And I've seen a number of times the design team goes off on a journey for 6 months, comes back with great insight. And that's good, and then what? And then they get stuck there. And I've seen that happen a number of times. So at enterprise level, design thinking needs to have its place, but it also needs, because when it has its place, it really derives significant value. Then there are 3 key things that we think about, and we talk about at the enterprise level, the things that the PMO needs to start thinking about having in place. I need to be able to prepare, govern, and manage work to those teams. What does that mean? These are very high-level touch points. Okay, each of these topics can be a course. Okay, talking training stuff. Okay, so what are we talking about? Prepare. Prepare for me is the biggest part that we miss as an organization in often the things that we deliver from an experience perspective, and you'll see a little bit later, I have a slide which maybe should have been here, is we need to rapidly understand and contextualize the purpose of what we're trying to deliver at that piece of work. Every piece of work has a purpose. Why we're doing it, it has a purpose, and it can be contextualized in a business, from a business perspective very quickly. Okay? We need to do that, we need to understand that work, and we need to break that work down as quickly and as rapidly as possible. Not big, thick documents, info requirements, but without the context and the frame of the contextual view of the business, we're actually then starting to throw things, as is in the last slide, at teams where they don't understand the context and they don't have work that's decomposed in a way that makes sense. The next thing is to govern, right? If I can get there. Right, there we go. It's really around that portfolio prioritization, okay, and the implementation of funding specific situations. So the bottom of the line is, okay, each organization is going to be different in the way they manage their portfolios. There's no one answer to it. You need to find a way that you can fund work effectively. You need to find a way that you can prioritize work effectively. My experience in the last 10 years, the biggest enabler to business agility has been at the portfolio level. The prioritization was embedded in the organization, and across the organization there was significant understanding of that priority. Not even in my organization, SAB Miller, which is now one of the biggest brewers in the world, okay, they took them 2 to 3 weeks to shift the focus when they lost one of the international beer brands. And they brought they took one of the other brands, I think, out of the US, and they shifted in 2 to 3 weeks the entire sales force. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of sales teams. They shifted the volume within 2 to 3 months, okay, from 80 down to 10, and the other product up to about 65% of that market. So they lost such a small, because their focus and when they're driving out their project was clear. Number one meant number one, okay, and the entire organization shifted immediately. And the last, we're going backwards, right? I'm being iterative, right? Okay. Okay. So the last thing is manage. And this is where portfolio and delivery starts really merging, because as we prioritize work at a portfolio level, we prioritize work at a program level, and at a project level, and at a delivery level, okay? And when you get to the point of using consistent prioritization, you start getting to the value really rapidly, okay? You start working out the value of the business and the value of that initiative really, really quickly, and you start allowing the team to start focusing on the high-value items very, very quickly. And regardless of the way you're going to deliver, whether it's a rich waterfall delivery, okay, hybrid or agile, when you start working on the high-value items first, you will see that moving faster, and you will get early value out of your delivery. So those are the high-level items that we do. And what does it look like? This is, we pray work, we govern and prioritize work, goes to the teams, and we're consistently getting outcomes. Okay. So really, when you get to the level, when you're getting this right, the level of throughput and agility is something significant. Fortunately, I've been on that journey, and I've seen it happen. Okay, so I'm going to work through from Uber to Old Mutual to MTN to Capitec, and I want to go through the first three quickly because there's just tons of learnings in Capitec that I want to share and have time to share. So Uber was a medium-sized organization, a mortgage originator, originated at that time when I was working with them, there were only the four big banks, okay, and integrated into. At that time, there was a big growth in the market, and we were integrating to everybody because the insurers wanted to do home loans. So there was a massive change in the market, and there were a couple of things we did. Big digital drive. Okay, we wanted to integrate a whole lot of pieces of the puzzle of a buyer. We wanted to be able to give them a search portal. We wanted to be able to help them with their home loan. We wanted to give them life insurance over their home loan, and we wanted to give them a credit card to go to buy stuff for their home. And we wanted to keep the customer engaged. And this was the vision. And we went on a really, really hard digital drive to bring that journey together So we had to work with a lot of stakeholders, obviously the real estate industry and the banks, all the way through. And we did some research on how we would take that. We sat with the business, we understood the business vision, we understood what the business wanted to achieve, we understood the business outcomes, and with the business we walked on this journey. And then we decided on how and what type of agile approach we would take, okay, and we started the journey. And yes, we smashed our heads a couple of times, sitting in a boardroom where I almost had a vote of being kicked out of the team. Okay, I had it on the executive team because we were bashing our heads, and I had to stand up and fight and say, just give us a chance to test and learn some of these approaches, because it was some time ago and these approaches hadn't been used before. And bottom of the line, what we did is we really, really got to understand what the business wanted to achieve. We used all the fancy things that people wanted to do. We used the digital. We created an internal private cloud. We used DevOps capability, but this was all new in the time, so people was looking at us like we were crazy. We got to the point that we had a product. We had a problem because suddenly the market started going through the floor. And that was the GFC hit. South Africa was pretty much protected from the GFC. However, the property market dried up. 50% of the property market dried up, and that stage the government said, it's a good time to do a credit crunch. Okay, so literally 30% of the market was still buying homes. At that time, we had to drive efficiency out of this platform. We had to reduce costs by 65%. We spoke to our biggest competitor, and we shared platforms. Okay, and we shared platforms because the platform was the most cost-effective platform there. When they came to, the reason why they came to work with us, not because we were great people, it's because they had one integration point. It's because the speed we had is understanding the business problem, breaking up the business problem, and moving that business problem into a delivery life cycle was 2 weeks. Okay, because we broke the problem down from a business enterprise perspective very quickly, and we moved that quickly into the teams. So they were integrating, and it took them literally a few months to integrate the entire. Now 75% of the South African origination market goes through that platform. It was an amazing journey, and what happened was in the downturn, that became a profitable product for the organization. So in some ways, helped them through that time. Okay, so moving on to Old Mutual. Okay, so Old Mutual is a gorilla in South Africa. In Africa, it's It's a very, very large organization, huge in terms of many divisions. And we did a massive transformation, took 45 to 50 divisions, and we centralized on the initial project to centralize finance, risk, capital. So it was accountants, actuaries, a whole lot of people to bring into a centralized function to service this large organization globally. And the biggest part we had to do was obviously drive out enterprise applications. We were working with Accenture, who wanted to start off and were not interested in Agile, and they were going waterfall, and that was it. Okay, we also had to drive a whole lot of, probably another half of the projects were boutique deliveries, looking at costing models, profitability models, and it was just like, it was a large amount of work. So we had to integrate both Agile and non-Agile work, and really what we did there again back, understood how the work was effectively broken down. And we broke the work down very, very rapidly and gave us a very, very good view of where the key touch points across those teams were, and then managed and what Agile people would call the cadences of the individual teams, so that the milestones would sink in at the same time. So we had a large, and this was a 2.5-year program, okay, and we had to deliver out, we got to the point that we managed to get the waterfall team delivering outcomes a little bit more regularly, okay, and then we got the Agile teams delivering again in sub-deliveries in between. So what we got over the last 2.5 years is early delivery of value, okay, and we created basically a large private cloud for the actuaries and the accountants in South Africa, about 750 of them, and then they provided those services globally across it was Africa, Middle East, Europe, and South America. So that was a great journey, and the experiences there was how bringing Agile and non-Agile teams together, and that it's achievable, and actually bringing the outcomes together quite rapidly. MTN, I wasn't there for a very long time because I started there after Old Mutual. It just wasn't an amazing journey that I wanted to be part of. They were bringing from all the countries around Africa and Middle East all their back office back to South Africa as a shared service, and that means, I mean, in the telco space, you've got to know. I mean, when you talk about managing assets, it's just massive. Okay, I'm managing how I'm erecting my network. That's just massive logistics, and basically they were bringing all of that back to South Africa, and they brought that back. And we started a program doing it. And what happened was, because the multiple teams was the same thing, we had a strong Agile team coming in and a strong waterfall team coming in, and it was a clash. It was a major clash. And at that stage, what we did is we again did the same thing. We broke work down, we put these teams together, okay, and we got to a point where the program director, him and I were working together, and he was having stand-ups with 200 people every day, okay. It was an amazing experience. And every day they had an artist who would come and talk about where they were in the journey, and they'd paint the point in the journey. Okay, the key leads would say where they were. It was only 20 minutes. Okay, at the end of each day, people would come to the big area. It was probably an area which was about 5 times the size of this room, and the walls were movable. There were some strong waterfall teams, there were hybrid teams and strong Agile teams, but the whole environment just lifted as the collaboration, which is a big part of getting good outcomes, was just humming. All right, so giving me time to get a Capitec Bank. So as Andre mentioned to you, the Capitec Bank, you've got to say they came out of the blue, but they didn't really come out of the blue, because they spent a lot of time thinking strategically of how to attack and disrupt the market in South Africa. They came out of a unsecured lending space, and they were starting to consolidate the unsecured lending environment in South Africa, and they had one major competitor, an African bank, and they designed their product and they went to market around the bank. And about 2.5 years ago, they hit a massive brick wall, because they were at about 2.5 million customers, and suddenly they were at 3.5, going on for 4, and they were now an enterprise. They had multiple divisions. Okay, they had multiple heads of executive directors who just grew. Okay, the entrepreneurs were getting buried inside this organizational growth, and they really wanted to unpack and go and be able to unpack that entrepreneurship. So basically, what we had to do there is we started the journey. And when I walked in, okay, they said, do not talk to me about Agile, okay, right? They said the word Agile, okay, failed here dismally and we don't want to hear it again. Now, we did slowly build some Agile teams, obviously in the digital space, and we built that team over time, and they were very productive. But what was happening is as that team grew, they became obsessive about how they wanted to run the digital business. And the moment they started to have to deliver again dependent work to the other projects, they hit a brick wall. And there was no negotiation. Okay, I want this now. Well, you wait. I got a 3-month release cycle, and I will tell you when I'm going to get that out for you. So the reality is, and the digital team was getting frozen because the bottom line is the enterprise was still on that cycle. So we took a journey where we said, how do we engage the business first? How do we collaborate? How does business take accountability? And we started the journey. Business takes accountability for every outcome. Okay, and we started the collaboration saying, if you're taking accountability, therefore you need to be in the room. Okay, so we started the journey of driving the collaboration and the culture of saying you need to be there. And it doesn't matter how young an organization is, it's very, very quick, and it's probably a human nature thing that people go into their silos very rapidly. And although it was a young organization, the silos were ingrained very quickly into that organization. So we needed to start breaking down the collaboration around the people who were involved, and the business executive was responsible to talk to the portfolio, and not the head of the portfolio, which was me. Okay, I didn't feel like being hit in the head. But the bottom line is, my job was to support them and not to talk for them. And the bottom line is, what happened is it became a very, very constructive session where the executive directors and the CEO spoke about the strategic initiatives and their value and their progress. Okay, and they debated there really around what challenges they were having and how they collectively could address those. That was a very, very key start, and it talks a lot about. And if you think about one of the things when you're talking about Agile scale, it's about the principles and it's about the outcomes. It's not about the methodologies. The bottom line is they were starting to think about how to work better together at an executive level. And the next thing was portfolio prioritization. They just started saying, there was a very, very nervous month where everybody thought anything under one was not going to be delivered. And the bottom line is we went through that prioritization, and we started prioritizing and shifting work. Okay, and the moment that happened, the pressure on the IT delivery just lifted, because they knew that the priority of work was coming from the business and not them put the priority together. And the project wasn't responsible for the priority. It was set when it came in. And we're starting to see that. I'm starting to see that in the work I'm doing right now. We're starting to see it set at the portfolio level. You're starting to see the teams that are receiving the work actually focusing on getting the job done, rather than worrying about debating about the resources and the priority. And we started seeing favorite hockey stick, I don't know if that's what you're saying here, okay, where you're starting to see the shift in terms of performance. We started seeing that when we started focusing on priority. The next thing, we started breaking work down better. And it doesn't matter what project it was, we broke the work down better. And the progress of that was, by the time we started getting the breaking down the work and the work through into those teams effectively, okay, whether they were the digital or non-digital teams, bottom line is they did threefold, the outcomes improved by threefold, okay, within about a 9-month period. Okay, the performance was, but that was because the outcome started. And it started because we focused in one area, showed the outcome working, and then as we did that, the executives started lifting their hands up and they said, well, it's working, do it in another place, and it just took a rapid growth. There was a couple of areas where we had to be blunt instruments and saying, trust me, this 24-hour prioritization session is going to work. And they said, you're crazy, okay? And it worked absolutely really well. We got about a 75% hit on our first major planning session. And what happened after that is the work really started flying through the organization. There are a number of examples that I can take you, a number of projects where people were involved, where because we broke the work down very rapidly, 1-hour session, we broke the first piece of work down in terms of what the business does, not the experience, not the solution. What do we do as a business? The moment we broke that down, The executives looked at it and said, our problem is not what we've been talking about. Our problem is actually somewhere else, sitting inside that value chain of ours. And they pulled that problem out, and there was about 50% of the time of those initiatives that we kicked off, there was usually a short-term solution that fixed the problem within a 3-month period. And that's not because the solution was always there or not there. It was because they were looking at the wrong problem, okay? And understanding the purpose of the project and understanding where what the actual business looks like was a massive shift in their thinking. And it brought more innovative thinking than I've actually seen in an organization, because they were now talking about what the business does and where I'm actually achieving my problems. A very, very big shift. And then ultimately we started bringing the teams together, and unfortunately the digital team did hit a number of brick walls because they had some big deliverables that they were supposed to deliver in terms of as a bank. They were a little bit ahead of their time in South Africa. I mean, we talk about here where we can budget in our app, and we have one app to do all our things and lend and save and all that in one account. That's how they ran their business. So they were even ahead in the global market, but they couldn't get their little last piece out because they had to integrate with the banking system, and they weren't prioritizing the work the way everybody else was. The moment they stopped and reprioritized their work, okay, in a logical way, that team just came to life, and actually they were the stars. So the bottom line is, at the enterprise level, okay, if not managed well, actually it tends to actually stifle those agile teams rather than actually bringing them to life. Right. Okay, so that's a big experience slide. Okay, so how it's really, these are the 3 things there. Okay, you got to live by this. We try to live by doing this for a long time. You need to keep it simple, okay, because I think, in a few other presentations, we see all this terminology, and then you see new terminology. That's just making it complicated, okay? If you pick up all that terminology, the heart of all that terminology is all the same stuff, okay? It's all the need of the business, the requirement of the business. It's the solutions. Okay, I have to deliver this stuff. It's all the same stuff. I'm doing it. You've got new and innovative techniques to do it, but it's the same context. Okay, and it's to focus on the principles, the techniques, and how I'm going to do things differently, rather than saying, okay, this is a new world. And that's what tends to push people away. Keeping it simple is really important, and just doing it right. I have a number of situations where we sit around the room debating hours and hours and hours of what the right things to do. Just do it right, okay? I think if you pick up the book, I think if you go to like real enterprise agile approaches like DSTM, if you go to Prince to Agile, I promise you when you unpack that, the heart of all those things are all the same things. They're all the similar things. They're all the same, okay? Just find those common themes and just do it, okay? It's not whether it's Prince 2 or all these things. Those things don't make the difference. It's those core things that make a difference to the business. And then lead well. I think one of the big learnings that I had in my journey was that all deliverers, right? We all know how to deliver, okay? And half the time we turn around and we say, ooh, I killed a few people while I was getting the job done, right? Because we know how to deliver outcomes, and we deliver outcomes in a way. But the last 15 years are realizing that if you want to deliver outcomes repeatedly and successfully, and you want to motivate teams, leadership is critical. So the investment in leadership that I've done over the time, personally myself, because I really had my own challenges, okay, together with the teams that I worked with and the teams that I managed, actually was a big enabler and help to that drive. And by giving them that leadership capability, allowed them to cope with the transformation, as well as coping with the complexity that you got with the disruption. Okay, so just a few pieces of information, okay? So the PMO governance model, so here's an example of a model. This is from DSDM. So again, look at the stuff. It's all simple stuff, right? So you're talking business case, requirements, solution, delivery. Okay, nothing's changed. The difference here, what DSDM does, and I will say that I think DSDM is the most unread website in Australia. Okay, it really is powerful content. Okay, so why have a lot of the teams that I've used and a lot of teams in the UK do use it, is because it is not a prescriptive framework. It's a framework that has tons of research, tons of contribution, and a lot of collaboration around challenges that people experience at an enterprise level delivering big, full delivery where you want to get large agility input. And really, at the end of the day, it talks to not a business. This is where you're starting to bring together managing a portfolio, managing a business case, and managing delivery of outcomes come together. And that's the biggest shift that we see, is that this distinctive view that a business case is something you go off and do and come back, okay, rather than being part of the delivery. Okay, and that's what's changing differently. As you unpack the purpose and unpack the need, your business case comes to life. Your business case is just an output of the work you're doing before you get to the next step of delivery. Okay, if your business case and your delivery doesn't match, which happens regularly today, okay, you have to start the project after the business case, which, as this shows you, is part of the project. So do you stop when you get the business case out? Maybe, okay? But the whole idea of each of these things, and you see there are 3 colors, okay? There is a 4th one, obviously. There's design thinking there now, okay? They haven't got in, okay? But there are 4 colors and 3 colors, and those 3 colors say, every time I start anything, I need to understand the business need, I need to understand if there's a solution, and I need to understand how I'm going to manage and deliver this. Even if I'm at level 0, okay? And I think one of the things we like to do is when I want to know what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to level 16 now, okay? Just stick at level 0, because half the time level 0 gives you enough information to decide whether tomorrow I can say no. But each step, before you get to level 6, go to level 1, okay? And that's the whole thing. You evolve this, you evolve the information, and it's all about just in time. Do I have just enough information to make the next decision? Okay, and what we've been targeting, and what we were targeting at Capitec Bank, is that within any SaaS project, should never go over 6 weeks to a business case. Now, I know you look and think, I'm crazy, right? But it worked. We had a massive project, okay, massive rollout. It was hitting probably about 32 systems, okay, and we managed to get the business case under 6 weeks because of the rapid unpacking of what the requirement needed to look like and estimating at that level. And we know that estimation, even at the high level and low level, is almost the same anyway, right? So, but if the right technique gets you to a high level estimation, that is pretty close to what you're going to get right. So the bottom line is, in this fuller view of an agile delivery, you're able to break up the work, break up the solution, and break up the management of it in pieces, and grow the understanding of that as you move, and you make the decision as you go. What determines your pace? The content, okay, not the method, okay, not the people in the room, the content of what you're trying to say. Initiative. If that initiative says, I want to do X, and you walk in the room, and that initiative says, it's simple, it's easy, I have the technology, I have the solution, okay, I have the management team, I have the delivery team, okay, I have the money, okay, right, you go through 6 weeks in 2 days, okay, done. Okay, so it's the content that determines the pace, and I think what we look for, and then that's often our fault, right? As PMO and project managers, we look for method to determine the next step. It's the content that determines the next step, and that's what this model brings to life. Now, what this model also allows you to do is say, what delivery method can I use? I can use Scrum in here, I could use Kanban in here, I can use at a large scale, I can use SAFe in here, but it's not prescriptive in how you're going to deliver, but it gives you the key principles of what you need to think about carefully if you want to take and you want to get outcomes faster. You can decide not to, okay? But then your outcomes will be slower. And the real purpose is one, okay? I'm going to repeat myself a bit, okay? I'm a bit obsessive compulsive, okay? Content determines the pace, but it's all about choice. I can still make a choice, okay, to do a 6-week business case where I only need 1 day. It's a choice that I can make, okay? But what you want to be able to give the business is that choice. So if I break my work up, and I say to them, well, I've broken my work up, it's taken us 3 days, we've broken up your work into 100 pieces like that, right? Okay, now I've broken it up, I think, let's prioritize it. We prioritize and we say, can we move? They say, no, I want to prioritize the whole thing, I want to deliver the whole thing. You can argue, you can fight, but at some point they're going to say, no, we're going to deliver the whole thing. That's the choice they make. However, they've got the option. My experience is when they make that choice, and as you're moving, okay, they will usually say, well, I'm struggling with time and money, what can I pull out? Well, you're ready for that. And that talks about, am I ready to adjust my priority? Yes, I am, because I've got to work in a way where I'm saying, you're struggling, we've delivered the Moscow, must have, should have, could have, you've looked at the content of the work, you said you're in trouble, you can pull those bottom out very quickly because they're actually not adding a hell of a lot of value anyway. Okay, so you're ready to perform and give the information to be able to make that shift very quickly. All right, so let me not plug DSDM too hard. I'm not their salesman. Okay, all right. So this should have been really up high in this, 40 to 50%. This is not my metric. I mean, every project that I've gone to that's been in trouble, probably 80% of the time, this is the problem, okay? A lot of agile teams, this is their problem, okay? I interviewed probably about 3 or 4 Scrum Masters in the last 6 months. 50% of their time was fixing this problem. 50% of an agile team. I mean, that's just crazy, right? Generally, most teams are struggling because the requirement is not getting right. So the whole thing is, this is not an agile, this is not just an agile thing. This is a project delivery thing. This is, do I understand my business that I'm delivering into? Okay, and what tends to happen is we don't have a mechanism that we can actually unpack requirements in a way that actually can be agile too, okay? Because people are going to hear a user story and say, well, how do I get, when I'm delivering requirements, how do I get to a user story? So the bottom line is, this I'm using a little bit of carte blanche from a colleague that I've been working with who's built a new model after years of research on existing models of how do I identify the heart of a requirement very quickly and unpack the business rapidly. And from there, I can cascade epics, features, and user stories, or I can create processes and create requirements if I choose. But again, the agility part comes to choice. Do I want to flesh out end-to-end process, bring the change team on the journey, and make sure the change team understand the impact? Or do I just want to prioritize 5 pockets of work and deliver them, okay? In Capitec Bank, when we put this up, and most of them said they were waterfall, I've never seen an organization turn so quickly saying, there's 3 things, take it, just deliver it, please, okay? And we got 3 monthly outcomes rapidly, okay? So it was a very, very, and the powerful thing about this, it actually starts shifting innovative thinking, okay? And it's something that really is something that I would make a thing. So let me talk very, very quickly. What are some things you should be considering? It's all about outcomes and principles. It's not about methods, okay? Don't understand the complexity. The biggest complexity is around change, is around thinking. But think about the simple things that have to change, get them right, okay? Define an approach and a framework that copes with complexity, that copes with multiple methods, because it's the reality of life, okay? You're not going to scale one agile method, okay? I mean, if you can, then you're a software company that only delivers software. But it's very, very unlikely. It's very hardly ever seen. Beware of some key pitfalls, okay? And I hope no one in the room is going to shoot me. But we have a lot of people who are purists in the agile world, okay? And that's a little bit of a contradiction, because in an agile world, you shouldn't be pure, okay? And terms, methods, issues become how we work. Okay, and that's really not how we function. Okay. You need to be able to think carefully, because it's about practical leadership, have choices, make decisions, be collaborative. Okay. And a little bit of other things that I want to stop and out. No, I'm running out of time. So, abandoned project governance, favorite thing. Okay, that's certainly not something we should be doing. Okay, ignoring the upliftment of the PM practice. Okay. I mean, that's just common. I mean, the big common question is, and I know I'm probably going to be asked it, what's a PM versus Scrum Master, right? I mean, everybody asks the question. The PM role is still so critical. My experience, and as we did this at Capitec, we invested in the upliftment of the program and project managers first, for 2 reasons. One, we needed to understand Agile terminology and understand how Agile worked so they could cope with the Agile delivery. 2, they need to be able to cope with Agile and non-Agile together. And 3, they were the catalyst to the transformation, because they were the people responsible for work. So bottom line, we turned around and said, you've got to help in this transformation. And they actually started coaching teams in the transformation as project managers. And that was in itself. The project management team became an asset to the organization really, really quickly, because they became a part of the catalyst of change. Defining an MVP, the favorite damn thing. Everybody knows what an MVP, everybody's got a different MVP. Just go out and find the definition and stick to one. It's just keep it simple. Okay, so, and commitment and persistence. We hit a brick wall often, and I think we were close at Capitec Bank. because there was a lot of pushback initially, but that persistence, and as soon as you start showing the value, the floodgates open and it comes through. But it doesn't come without a really, really hard work, knowing what you're doing, being consistent what you're doing, and being brave at times, and being a bit of a blunt instrument, as project managers know how to be, to just get to the point where you're starting to show value and be persistent. Okay, so really, really briefly, coming out of PM Partners, really talking about, at business agility level, we want to say we're aligned. It's all about the business. The business is engaged. The business is part of the journey. The business is driving the journey, and we provide that service to bring them alive. Okay, we have true servant leaders and when the leaders are walking into the room and talking about the value of their project, they're excited about that change because of the support they're getting from the PMO, from the project team. Some very critical success factors, because I'm probably 30 seconds out, but really quickly, right? What are some of those success factors? Embracing the approach. Embracing the approach is some fundamentals. People need to understand, okay, that you've got to accept the approach that you might not get everything. Okay, that's really key. It's not a difficult message because, 20% of the stuff you're never going to get value from anyway. Okay, it's easy to show. Stick to those simple principles. But that approach is quite important for them to understand. Okay, business engagement, critical 100%. If the business is not engaged, okay, active and ongoing, you're really not going to get the outcomes you're looking for. Effective and rapid requirement gathering. You've heard me say that 100 times. I can't be more. It's effective prioritization. Two fundamental key things. Okay, something that's not on there. Effective cross-management, project cost management, dependency management. You really got to have that right. And there are a number of techniques to manage non-project, non-agile and agile teams together, and that's quite important that it lift and happens. Okay, a good, effective solution delivery team. If you're going to drive agile and agile ways of working, certainly in your development teams, there has to be a solid development team. Okay, and these guys need to be empowered, they need to be stable, they need to be skilled, and the team size needs to be relevant. I think we love having 20-man teams. Okay, but in reality, a good development team works between 5 and 9 people. Okay, that's the fact. 5 to 9 people is the most effective development team you're going to get. If you've got a 20-man team, then break it into 3. Okay, those teams become really effective. Okay, so that's quite important. Iterative and incremental, and I'll just say one thing: incremental and iterative just means don't do too much too quickly. It's all about just in time. If I take a business case, I've got a business case and I start with a business case. I'm going to go back to my manager tomorrow and say, listen, this is the framework of my business case. Does it make sense? It's just an iterative approach to saying, I'm not going to come back 3 weeks later and you say, half the stuff I'm just a waste of time. I've just wasted my time doing it. But whether you're doing a piece of work that is a project task versus delivering software, check in all the time with your team to make sure you're going in the right direction. Transparency is probably the heart of the leadership stuff. Trust and transparency are two key things. Good teams have trust and transparency. If these things are coming through, and we do transparency in a number of ways. While we've exposed them, I know visual management boards, people go crazy, but the thing about visual management boards is it creates transparency. If you've got transparency, then maybe the visual management board doesn't really work, but if you don't have it, the visual management brings to life what's happening there, and there's no hiding, and that's the whole thing. You've got to have brutal truth, you've got to be transparent, and you've got to be able to share the good and the bad. And I think often teams are in case of hiding the bad, not talking about the truth. If something's not working, we need to have a red button on there that says it's not working, and we need to know that today, not by the end of the month, in the Steerco pack. Okay, all right. So I think a little bit different from my perspective than others. You can start with small pieces of change, and those small pieces of change will start bringing that business agility. And as you embed more and more of that change over time, okay, that value increases. And I've done that a number of times. You didn't have to go on a massive program. We just slowly, incrementally increased that capability, and we saw the change moving, and at one stage quite rapidly. All right, thank you.